The title of today's podcast is Medaase. Medaase means thank you in my native language. And today's version is part 3. I started applying for jobs in the fall of 2004 because I knew that my time at Yale Divinity School will end upon my graduation in May 2005. By then, I had left Atlanta, settled in New Haven, and was enjoying my time at Yale Divinity School. But the reality of securing a position before I graduated wasn't lost on me. I checked my email one day and found an email from the Dean of Trinity Cathedral in Columbia, South Carolina. That was very exciting. He interviewed me on the phone, and the next time I heard from him was when he asked if I would be willing to meet him in New York City. Sure, why not? I responded. So we scheduled a date and time, and I drove to meet with him. After a great interview with the dean, a great person I must add, I received a job offer and accepted the position without thinking twice about it. He invited me and my family to visit Columbia, South Carolina. Monique was still in Atlanta with our 2 daughters, and she drove to Columbia while I flew from New York. We arrived in Columbia at just about the same time. The hospitality given to myself and my family was amazing. The people were great, the service was beautiful, and the food was awesome. We departed Columbia with a satisfaction that I had made a right decision. And it wasn't until we finally settled in South Carolina that it became apparent that this may not be the right fit. I didn't have any issues with anything, especially on the issues of race, because I was simply oblivious to it. One of the real challenges for many Africans who immigrate to the United States is that because we didn't have to deal with the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow and all the ills that are associated with the dehumanization of African Americans, we simply do not have the language with which to articulate this experience. Not only that, but an African immigrant is inherently oblivious to racism unless it is overtly blatant. Based on my experience at All Saints, I erroneously assumed that every Episcopal church is the same and that every single part of America is the same. People are the same everywhere. Everything is the same. The food is the same. The roads are the same. Boy, was I wrong. Sundays were huge challenges in my household because Monique wouldn't come to church, nor would she bring the children to church. Her reason was that church wasn't diverse enough. She obviously saw something that I did not see at the time. For me, all was well and dandy. I could go to church, be the only African American in a sanctuary of 300 to 400 people, and be perfectly fine with it. But something about the place made her nauseous. I did not see the absence of African Americans as an issue, but for her, it was a big issue. It told her more about the character of the people and the place than anything else she could read about the place. Whenever she raised the issue, I would immediately revert to my African mindset and demand answers as to why it was a big deal for her. With time, I also grew disillusioned about the community and my place within it. What triggered this disillusionment was a conversation I had with a parishioner I happened to share a row with on a flight to Dallas, Texas. I don't remember his name, But in our chat from Columbia, South Carolina to Dallas, he told me about himself and his time and experience in Columbia, South Carolina. On that flight, he told me an interesting story. He said, "Manny, I have worshipped at this cathedral since the early 70s, and I've run for vestry several times, but not once have I been elected. Although I consider myself more capable than some of the people who get elected to the vestry, I have never been elected." I asked him, "What do you think might be the reason?" This was his response: "I don't know, but my guess is that it is because I am not from the area." "What difference does it make?" I asked in bewilderment. "It makes a lot of difference. If I am white and I don't feel accepted within a white community, do you think the same community will be accepting of an African American?" That was an eye-opener for me. To this Episcopalian from Dallas, Texas, Medaase. As I reflected on the conversation with this parishioner, my weekly debate with Monique, and some weird happenings, it became apparent that I did not fit into the culture, nor was I as welcomed as I thought I was. I felt that if even the color of my skin was a turn-off to some, my character and ministry would speak for me. Remember Martin Luther King's words, "Judged by the content of the character and not the color of the skin." This feeling was such that it took every joy I had in ministry away from me. My understanding of ministry was to serve, and serving at that church had turned into what I did not know could happen in a church. To remedy my disillusionment with ministry, I turned to law. I studied for the LSAT and applied to law schools. I was accepted into the University of South Carolina School of Law. It was a big deal for me because I thought I had figured my way out of the mess in which I found myself. The cathedral and I separated, and I enrolled in law school. I truly enjoyed law school and the intellectual curiosity that came with it. But all too soon, it fizzled out as I wondered about what I was doing in law school. I am a priest and will always be a priest. This isn't where I belong. I belong in the house of the Lord. All through my challenges, there were more than a few people whom I credit for keeping me grounded. They looked out for me and showed more than a keen interest in my ministry and life. I still keep in touch with them because they are more than good people. In fact, there were more than enough faithful Christians in that congregation for whom the evil of racism bore no resemblance to who they were. They always treated me with respect and kindness. To all of them I say, Medaase. I have had more than enough time to reflect on this part of my ministry and life. The whole experience reminds me of the assurance from the shepherd's psalm. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The reality is that the valley of the shadow of death is engineered by real people, just as much as the comfort of the rod and the staff is made possible by real people. I give thanks to those who demonstrate how low we can go, but I give greater thanks to those who also demonstrate what it means to lift people up, to look beyond themselves. I give thanks to those whose actions remind us about human dignity. Some of the things that were going on did not make any sense to me, but I accepted them for what they were. In fact, I did not ascribe any racial element to them. It wasn't until years later that someone who knew what was going on revealed to me what was going on behind the scenes. That was when things began to make sense to me. If I ever learned anything from my experience in South Carolina, it was where I learned about the impact of racism in the church and how destructive it can be. Without that experience, I would have pursued my ministry with the erroneous belief that all is well and dandy. But it is not. I can only imagine the number of people who still... I can only imagine the number of people who may still be suffering from the impact of racism within the church. My faith in God suffered greatly, but it bounced back up because I found a greater sense of the divine hand at work in all that was happening. I learned that we either learn by wisdom or experience. I did not learn by wisdom. And as devastating as the experience was, it provided me with an opportunity to look at faith in a different but enriching way. There is no bad experience if you learn something from it. And for that, I say Medaase. Departing from South Carolina brought a huge sense of relief. It felt like turning over a new page. It was a new beginning for me. And for all the possibilities of new beginnings, I say Medaase.